I was born in Uganda. My parents were from East Africa, and their parents were from India but had emigrated. And at about the age of 7 or 8, there was a coup in the country, and Idi Amin became the president. My grandfather was a really clever guy, and he understood that this was a dangerous thing. It was an unstable thing. So we all lived in one big family house. It's a very traditional. Came from a very traditional family. Um, my father, his two brothers, their wives, their kids, the grandparents, 3 generations all lived in the same house. And he knew that this was a dangerous situation. So he got my father to go to India to start to look for other income, because he felt that there would be a problem. And 9 months later, Idi Amin expelled all the Asians, gave them 3 months to leave with everything behind, not even if you were a citizen. So I was a Ugandan citizen. I became stranded in India as a stateless. I didn't have any nationality or passport or anything. And the rest of the family were expelled. A lot of people came to Britain because they were part of the original British Empire. I was in India until the age of 15. It was very important formative time because it's something that I carry with me today, which is in both places seeing extreme poverty. And that has been with me, seeing it on the street, seeing kids. You land in Bombay and you've got kids tapping on your car door as you're coming in from the airport, on the window, and, begging, and it really stays with you. And so changing that has been one of the missions of my life ever since. And then because I came from a very traditional family, my brother was sent to school in England because that was considered a better education. I wasn't, because I was a girl, and that was not seen as important for girls to have, because they were just going to get married and have kids and not pursue a career, not even fulfill themselves in their own interests. So I went on a pretend hunger strike, actually. It was pretend because I cheated, because my granny fed me, in fact. So that worked out all right. But they understood how determined I was to come to school in Britain. And for me, it was also about seeing a new world, expanding my horizons. So finally they gave in, essentially, because I was so stubborn. And I came to school to Britain, and it was, having kicked up such a fuss, I had to make it work. I mean, it was really quite hard, because I came into a school that was overwhelmingly white, and it was quite hard. My headmistress she said to me, "Oh, well, you're Indian, so you must be quite good at maths, but you must be not very good at English. So I have to tell you," she made me sit at a mock exam, and I've never worked so hard in all my life. I felt like I had the weight of a nation to prove. So I really, really worked at it, and had to earn my right to stay in the school. And that was me arriving into Britain. Yeah.
Wow. So before you were their age, you had lived in 3 countries.
Yeah.
You had fought your own family for the right of kind of equal education.
Yes.
And won that fight, and ended up, and now so you've fought all these barriers, and now you're finally in a school in the UK, and now you're faced with an education system that is actually, not being supportive, but actually being stereotypical, and holding you back. So when you're going through such difficult things back to back, younger than the young people in this room, where does one find the resilience to stay focused and keep going?
I think it's one of probably the single most important things that has stayed with me all my life, which is what I had in my head, the imagination of what I wanted to be didn't match what other people wanted of me. And that's the single most important lesson, is not to let what other people think of you, because they see you and they see something else and they have their own bias and they make an assumption about you. And you shouldn't let that assumption determine who you want to be, who you are and who you want to be. Don't let that hold you back, because you have to decide who you want to be, and it's in your head, and that's what you aspire to. And it was partly because I was, in one sense, running away. I was so determined, because if I hadn't done that, I would have had an arranged marriage. I would have stayed at home. I would have been, in many ways a second-class citizen. And I was reading and doing things that were teaching me that there's another way, and that's the way I wanted. So I was sort of running away from what I had, and that made me determined, but it taught me something that had stayed with me throughout.
Can we get a round of applause for that, like that? So, I mean, we're 5 minutes in, and the quality of life lessons are already so incredibly high. I love that. I love that lesson. Right? Only you know who you are, and only you know what your path is and what your path needs to be. It's not for your parents and not for your school and not for your friends to decide what you do career-wise, otherwise, the way you choose to live your life. You have the right to make those decisions. And if you stick with it, even when it feels really, really, really hard, even when you think my family would never accept this and my friends would never accept this and I can never make this happen, if you stick with it, you can be as successful as our speaker today. You can be at the top of your game if you stick with it. And speaking of being at the top, so you came to the UK, you've got this headmistress who's unhelpful. Everything is working against you, but you made it to university, and you didn't make it to just any university. You made it to one of the world's best universities, Oxford University, and you read PPE there, which many would say is perhaps one of the hardest programs to get into. And so young people, who in the room is aspiring or considering applying to Oxford or Cambridge?
Wow.
And who's
fabulous.
And who's considering applying to PPE? Who's got an interest in politics or government? Don't be shy. Raise your hand nice and proud.
I think that's the right approach.
So, Shriti, tell us a little bit more about why you picked Oxford. What was that process like? What advice would you have for so many young people in this room who are so ambitious for their futures and for their community's future around should they do it, if they are going to do it, tips on how to maneuver that process?
You have to decide what works for you and I wanted to read PPE because I thought, as it turned out incorrectly, but I thought at the time that I want to change how poverty works, how wealth works, how economics works, and you can only choose to do that through political routes, because in fact politics and government is about choice. It's about choosing, and that we were choosing the wrong things, and I wanted to make a change. It was naive, but it's what drove me at the time. And so I picked PP for that reason. And then wanting to do politics and economics, the best place to do it was Oxford. And, my view of life was, well, why wouldn't you aspire to be in the best place? I couldn't tell my parents that I wanted to go to Oxford because they would have wanted me to stay at home and go, they weren't against me going to university, but they would have wanted me to live at home while I was going to university. And that wasn't Oxford. So I applied without telling them. And I persuaded, thank God, that headmistress went on her sabbatical. So I had a deputy headmistress who was really supportive, and she privately tutored me to sit the exam. I applied to a women's college just to make it a little bit easy. If I got in, just to make it a little bit easier for my parents to accept. And the deputy headmistress said, let's not go too far. So, and then I only told them when I got in, and then I got them to come into school and speak to her, and she was able to persuade them that this was the best thing for me. So it was a real concession from them to let me leave home to do this. And they still harbored that real hope and belief that I would settle down, have an arranged marriage. And even when I was studying, they would, rock up with some young man that they would introduce me to. And in fact, they rocked up one day without enough warning. And I had a young man in my room who, by the way, was just a friend, but I had to put him in the cupboard while my mother was there, hide him from her. So it was a journey that was as much about a social and cultural change for me and learning who I was going to be, because I didn't really know enough about Britain at the time. I'd been there for a couple of years in a school, but just meeting people from different backgrounds and suddenly finding people who were more like me. They thought a lot more like me. They were interested in the books that I was reading. They were interested in some other things that I was interested in theatre. I was into so many different things. And so I was able to find people who were friends, who I could be friends with. And so that was one of the most important parts of going to university, is not just what you are learning academically. It's about who you're learning to be and discover who you are through your friends and through the other activities. And that was really important part of being at Oxford, or any place that you choose in your next phase.
And I think that that's the real success, and that's the real key of an Oxbridge interview. And as you know, our students who were on the program last year are currently going through their interviews at Oxford and Cambridge, and those who were on the program 2 years ago have now coming to the end of their first year. And if you've listened to the podcast that we've sent out, you heard last week we had an alumni who's now at Cambridge reading history, and she, as you will hear on the podcast, went deaf as she was in her year 12, so dealing with loads and loads of things, and so didn't get her predicted grades, but actually she was still offered a place because of her interview, right? Because of what she said in an interview. And I love what Shriti said about why she wanted to study PPE. It wasn't because she wanted to be a politician. It's because she wanted to change poverty, because she had seen poverty herself on the streets of India, on the streets of Uganda, and she wanted to make a positive contribution and change things and make things for the better. That's what Oxford and Cambridge, or any centre of excellence, is looking for, that passion, that authenticity. So as you start to think about your personal statements, you start preparing for interviews, or even start thinking about what course you want to study, where is your passion? It's not about the money. It's not about the name. It's not about the job you might get after. Forget about all of that. It's about, what do you love? Where do you want to make the greatest change? And if you pick something based on that, the rest will fall into place. Would you agree with that, Shriti?
Totally. I mean, I've had such an odd career. I mean, jump from one thing to another thing, but I've always, the most important word is passion. What is your passion? What do you believe in? It can't be about, I want to be managing director, I want to have a big car, I want to earn this salary. That doesn't work. And by the way, if you're an employer, you can see that a mile off, and you never employ people like that. It's about whether you are really committed to what you're doing because you love it. You're going to get out of bed every day because you're going to do this, whatever the thing is, study this, do that job, whatever it is, whether it's kind of studying politics, or whether it's being a nurse, or whatever it is, it's because you love it. And what's the worst that can happen? You may not succeed, but most likely you will, because you'll be good at it because you love it. But even if you don't, you've spent your time doing something you love, as opposed to spending your time trying to become something that you may or may not ever be, which is, somebody who earns a lot of money and has a big car. That it's not going to be fulfilling. It's not. You have to follow your passion, and you have to actually believe that you will leave the world a better place than you came into it. That's the single most important thing, and that will sustain you throughout your life.
That's such incredible advice. Round of applause for that advice. I'm loving this advice. When we did the first session here, when we started the program, me and all the team at Featured Leaders talked to you about why we started this initiative, right? That's our desire and our want to leave this world a better place than we found it. And as you start to think about your social action projects that we want you to start thinking about at the end of this program, start thinking about where do you want to add value? What do you want to make better? What are you passionate about? Where can you make something different? Because that gift is not just in our hand to give because we're old and etc. It's in all of your hands. You can do little things at school that make a difference, at your mosque or synagogue or temple or your cricket club or wherever, drama club or wherever you hang out. You can do little things that improve the lives of those people that are in that space. It's a privilege to do it, but after this program, it's also a responsibility. Right? You've heard from incredible leaders like Shriti. You need to do something with that. You need to take that somewhere and cascade it. So start thinking about that, please. Let's talk about parents and university and et cetera, where you want to go, what you want to study. Raise your hand if what you want to do after 18, whether it's go to university, degree, apprenticeship, the course you want to study, the uni you want to go to, etc. Raise your hand if that's different from what your parents want you to do. So remember these lessons. Remember this lesson you've heard today. You need to make success of it, but stick to your guns, be confident, go to that uni even if it's not at home, study that degree even if it's not going to lead to a direct job in your parents' minds, and it will all work out.
It'll work out. Yeah.
And I love, Shriti, I love how your passion for your work has come from lived experience. You know, and we asked the young people in this room a couple of sessions ago, raise your hand if you've ever experienced some kind of discrimination, and there's so many hands that go up. So how do we take that lived experience and do something positive about it as you're doing in your work in this space? So Shriti, let's fast forward now. So you're at Oxford, a successful time, and now it's time to look for a job.
Yeah.
And so what guided your decision-making process in that journey?
Well, I wanted to work somewhere that I could follow the passion that I had for development, particularly in India, Africa, Latin America, other parts of Asia. And I also needed to earn enough money to live on my own. Otherwise, I still had the threat of the arranged marriage over me. So I found two potential jobs. One of them was for the BBC World Service, and the other was this bank, rather strangely, that did this work for governments in what we now call emerging markets. They were not called that in those days. I'm talking a long time ago. So I applied for both, and what was interesting is when I was going through the process, I decided that I wanted to work with the bank because I would rather do it than observe it and comment on it. And I know that observing and commenting on it also makes a huge difference because it educates so many more people about what's going on in the world. But I felt like I was a doer. So I started working for this bank. They didn't allow me to go into this area until I was properly trained. But, within a couple of years, I was working, with the government of Indonesia on their external problems. I was restructuring debt in a couple of African countries, in Central American countries, and it was finding a way to merge what I needed to do, which is earn a living, and what I really cared about doing. It wasn't entirely it wasn't central to the bank, and they didn't sort of think this was the most important thing. And I wouldn't say this was the most successful part of my career. They also the city in 1984. I mean, gosh, it's changed. It hasn't changed enough, but it's really changed. But I went into, I was, I think, only the second or third year where they took women into, 1984 was the second or third year they had women as graduate trainees into the whole of the city system. And for some, in the second year they paid, there were two of us, we paid us less than the men who were just exactly this, you're doing exactly the same thing as us. And when I went to, both of us decided we were going to go and talk to them together. And they sort of said, oh, well, but you're women and you'll be less committed and we don't have to invest in you and things. And it wasn't even illegal then to say that. It was just bizarre. So that was a period I learned so much because I was then completely international. I was traveling around the world, and it was a very exciting time where you were working with governments. And that also then suddenly gave me this whole passion about how actually you can change things from working in government.
Thank you. And God, that's so shocking to hear that the city did not hire women until like around 1985. I mean, we're not talking about some developing emerging economy. We're talking about the United Kingdom. We're talking 30 years ago.
Well, slightly more, but yes.
30, 40 years,
40 years.
40 years ago. 40 years ago. I'm older than 40. So that means when I was born, women were still not able to. I know it's shocking that I'm older than 40. I thought you would gasp, but we'll go over that. So when I was born, women still could not work in the city. How crazy is that? We mustn't forget how much progress has been made because of people like Shriti, because people have been the first in those spaces and places, dared to be the first, so we can have those opportunities. Right? So where are you going to be the first? Where are you going to create that opportunity for those that come after you? That's incredible. And for your manager to just say to you, well, you're a woman, so that's less money.
I mean, one of the people that I worked with said to me, well, you're really quite good. I mean, I wouldn't have hired you myself, but you're really quite good. And I sort of said, what do you mean you wouldn't have hired me? I'm not sure our clients want to really have someone that looks like you. I didn't, to my shame, I didn't report it. I didn't say anything. It was just what people thought at the time. And what you thought was, I have to work harder. I have to be better. I have to be more like them. I have to find a way of fitting in. And actually, I don't think that's fair or just, and I'm not sure that's the right way. In fact, I know it's not the right way. Because in one sense, when you try to fit in, you're just being somebody else, and you're never going to be the best at being somebody else. You can only be the best at being yourself. And so to bring who you are and bring yourself and bring the way you and what your experiences are is the unique thing that you bring to a place. And fitting in is not... You don't have to make people uncomfortable. I get that. But you have to bring who you are. And I learnt that over a long period of time, that I was never going to be as good as them at being who they were. I just had to be myself. And then I learnt what were the things that I could understand. When we were going across all these countries internationally, I instinctively understood them better than they did because I'd lived in so many different countries. So you find your own strength and you find your own perspective. That becomes your strength.
I love that advice, but one of the things we try to embed in the young people is your diversity is your superpower.
Yes.
Right? The thing that makes you different. And it's not about the color of your skin. It's not about your religion. It can be about so many different things. It can be about your upbringing. It can be about neurodiversity. It can be about sexual orientation. It can be about so many things, right? It can be about your mental health. Whatever the thing is that when you're young feels different.
Yes.
And feels you want to hide it because it sets you apart from people. That's the thing that makes you special. That's the thing that makes you you. That's the thing. Leaning into that diversity, owning that diversity is going to be the thing that makes you stand out when you're interviewing with senior people like Shriti. Would you agree?
I think it would particularly powerful is when somebody comes in and they own it. And that shows you that even if you don't feel like you belong, and I'm sure all of you in different ways have felt that, it was such a huge part of my 20s and 30s that I didn't belong. But it became my strength that I didn't belong, and that meant I felt liberated by that. I felt I could say some things that other people wouldn't say because it was uncomfortable for them to say it to their own group of people, whereas I was like, well, I've got nothing to lose. I'm just going to say it because I am different and I don't belong to this group. And then over a period of time, you find that people will accept that and accept who you are because you are accepting who you are.
I love that. Absolutely. God, powerful, powerful words. And the reason that people can't say those things to women or to people of color or to, LGBT people, etc., is because people have stood up against it over the last 40 years, right? It's taken people to stand against that, to say, actually, to challenge that kind of rhetoric. You can't say that because I'm a woman or because I'm a person of color, whatever the case is, right? But we know that it's still those kind of misogynistic, homophobic, racist comments are still happening in our schools, lunch break as banter, but we need to stop those things, right? So next time you hear a comment like that, are you going to be an upstander? Are you going to challenge it? Because if people like Shriti didn't challenge it back 40 years ago, those things would still be happening today. So we each have a responsibility to challenge that rhetoric to make it better. And Shriti, you talked about how you started to realize that governments could make a difference. And actually, you were a government minister as well. I mean, the CV is very long and impressive. Tell us about what it means to be a government minister and what your portfolio was and what kind of work you did as part of that.
Well, I joined government. I joined government straight from this bank that I still worked at because I was interested in politics and economics. So I started looking at some of the things that were happening in the country and some of the things that the Labour Party at the time was promising to do, which I felt was more in line with my values. So I wrote a paper about a couple of things, reforming the Bank of England and, reforming how schools were refurbished or whatever it might have been. I wrote sort of technical subjects, but I got in touch and wrote some of this stuff for people, and it came to their attention. So I had created some form of relationship. And then when they got into power, I didn't hear very much from them. I was actually just sort of, I think I was in South Africa or something. And then I suddenly get this call from Gordon Brown's office that said he'd like you to come in and see him. And I thought, well, he wanted another paper on something. So I went to see him and he said, I've got these 5 problems. And he gave me some list of 5 problems that he had. And I can't pay you very much, but, I hope you'd help. And I go, why is he offering to pay me? I'm just going to write him some papers. So then I left his office. He said, will you help? And I said, yeah, sure. And I left his office, and then his office said to me, so you agreed to take the job? And I went, what job? He didn't offer me a job. I didn't know that he offered me a job. And he was sort of so vague about it that I didn't realize it was a job. And then I suddenly thought, you know what? Yeah, I'll do it. Why not? Because somebody was giving me an opportunity. I took a 95% pay cut to take that job. But it was, and I thought I'll do it for a couple of years, see how it goes. And then I was still there 8 years later, and then he made me a minister. So that was, when somebody gives you an opportunity, just take the risk. It'll bring you new avenues. It'll be something different. And I thought, well, I don't really do politics. When he became prime minister, I don't really want to go to number 10. That's not my thing. And he was very clever. He said, well, you could become minister for Africa, and he knew which buttons to press, of course. So I thought, yes, okay, that'll be a good thing to do. So I went off into the Department of International Development, and the financial crisis started to hit. And I don't know how many of you've read about the financial crisis. And he calls me up and he goes, what are they saying about Northern Rock? What are they saying about the banks? And I said, I'm in Addis Ababa. They're not saying anything. I'm doing my job. And he said, no. And the next minute I got reshuffled, and I was minister in the cabinet office with him, and I was working on the financial crisis, and that just completely overtook my life. It was probably the most difficult period of my life. I still sometimes can get nightmares about it because you feel the weight of that responsibility on you, and you don't know if there's going to be no cash in ATMs, and schools are going to close, and businesses are going to close, and who knows what's going to happen. I was reading up about the 1930s when all of that had happened, so it was a very traumatic time. It was a very difficult time. I didn't get enough sleep. I didn't get but it was, in retrospect, I felt like everything that I'd been doing before that all came together in this one moment, that I was there in the right place with all of these different experiences that somehow helped me understand what needed to be done and support the government and the Prime Minister to do what needed to be done, because I had so many different experiences that were coming together. So there's always serendipity in life. Things will come together. So when somebody gives you an opportunity, it may not be exactly as you planned, but just take it. Take the risk.
Again, amazing advice. And, you say, Shriti, that somebody gave you that opportunity. I disagree. You created that opportunity, right? You created that opportunity by writing those papers, by having a voice, by putting your opinion out there, and by showing how it could be done a better way. If you had never written those papers because you cared, Gordon Brown never would have come to you for that job.
Yeah.
And I think there's a real lesson in that. Create your own opportunities, right? If you want to do something, make it happen. No one is going to give it to you. No one is going to say, oh, please come to this university or please come and do this job. You need to hustle. And that hustle will mean different things for different people. In Shriti's world, she's an academic. She went to Oxford. And she had the real life world experience of working at a bank that was actually doing this work. The combination of those things meant that she was really well placed to think about how things could be done better and then to record that in writing. And the government came knocking on her door when they needed help. Just think about that for a second. The government, right? So what's your area of expertise? Where are you going to be passionate? Where are you going to try to lead the way? And it might feel like nothing is happening and no one is listening. How many papers did you write, Shriti?
Oh, God, thousands, I should think. I mean, I at that point, I've been working for 15 years. There's never a substitute for just carrying on with the thing you care about.
Yeah.
The doors will open eventually.
Exactly. And the financial crisis, you might be too young to know about it, but it was a difficult time. I mean, there was families that couldn't pay for their next meal.
Yeah.
We didn't know if schools are going to be open, as you say. It felt like the whole system was going to fall apart and the most vulnerable in society were going to suffer the most. And so I
did, yeah.
Thank you for carrying that burden for the rest of us and for restructuring and for all the things that you would have done to get us through that and to get us on a stable footing as a country, because, it was scary times and we're seeing that cycle perhaps repeat in other places in the world. So it's great that your reach is so international, because I think so many countries, so many millions of people are benefiting from your experience and your expertise. So thank you.
That might be a bit grand.
We love grand our future leaders. The last thing I wanted to say was what we call a squiggly career or portfolio career.
Definitely very squiggly.
Which is a great strength. Right? Which is a great strength. Go on to the days where you go to uni, you get a job and you stay in that job forever. That's boring. Go and do lots of different things and learn lots of different things. Because it's that combination of having done lots of different things that places you in really good positions to do the amazing things.
I think this is a really important point that particularly parents and others kind of feel nervous about it. They want you in a very stable profession. And that's great. If you have that vocation and you have that passion in that stable profession, that's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I think of life sometimes as Venn diagram of circles that overlap. And when I was there in 2008 and it was a financial crisis, where was the answer? The answer was in the piece in the middle where all the circles intersected. It was the politics and understanding you could nationalize bank. It was the economics and understanding what would happen if we didn't. It was about finance and markets because they were completely not understanding what was going on. It was about being international because if we'd done it on our own without internationally influencing the others, it wouldn't have worked. And so that's what I meant by all of the different bits come together. And so being broad, there's nothing wrong with being broad. And in fact, as you get more senior, people want you for your judgment and how does that you understand things, you understand trends. That comes by joining dots and seeing a lot of different things and being broad. So you can have more than one passion.
I love that. Thank you, Shriti. I love that advice. In fact, go and find more than one passion. Right? Because it makes you more balanced. Okay, we're going to be coming to you for questions in the next couple of minutes. But two things I want to talk about before we do that. Shriti, I want to talk about being the first. being the first in a place or a space. When I started this program 6 years ago, we used to say to young people, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And we want to set up a program where you can see it. And recently we changed that from if you can't see it, you can't be it to if you can't see it, go and be it.
Yeah.
Right? If you can't see someone like you that's doing the thing you want to do, be the first. And you have been the first in so many ways. So, for instance, you were the first female chair of a big UK retail bank, Santander's. You were the first female and person of color chair for the Shakespeare Company, which is something that is very steeped in British tradition. I know you're really passionate about the creative industries as well. Someone might be thinking, you're this finance expert, which you are, but actually you really value the creatives as well, and really wanting to encourage that. So tell us a little bit about maneuvering that space when you're the first woman, person of color, whatever, in that place.
It goes back to, and I think something that you talked about right at the start, is it's about who you are in your head and what you think you can do, and not letting the barrier that somebody else has stop you from being what you want to be. I didn't have role models that I particularly aspired to when I was growing up. And I found them strangely in Shakespeare. I was at age 14, we were reading Julius Caesar, and I was growing up in India, and there weren't enough copies. We didn't have any internet, obviously, in those days. And there weren't enough copies of Julius Caesar print, so somebody gave me the play in the complete works of Shakespeare. Wow. So, I mean, I would read anything, so I read it. I obviously didn't understand most of it, but I read the complete works a couple of times before I was 15. But I loved the stories. I could follow the stories. I didn't always understand the language. And my role models were Rosalind, who was brave and ran away to the forest from As You Like It, or Beatrice, who, was bolshy and never wanted to get married, or Portia, who was, smarter than any man in the room. And those are my role models. I mean, so you can find who you want to be if you can't imagine it yourself in lots of different ways. And for me, the creative industries are really important. People think of it as, risky business. It's all about actors. That's not what it is. This is something that Britain is really good at. We are one of the leaders in the world in the creative sector. And whether that is the musicians who perform for the video games, that is one of our biggest exports, by the way, video games. Whether that is the graphic designer that's working for advertising, and we're one of the best people in the world on advertising. These are all really serious sectors. It employs 2.3 million people, the creative industries. So I've always had that sort of sense that being broad, yes, I did maths, but I also did English, because those are the two things I really, loved and wanted to do. And you can do that. And so you have to find your own space. And when people write, oh, she was the first, chair of the bank, and the first chair of the insurance company, whatever it was, I don't think about that. I walk into the room and I am the chair, and I'm going to do the best job that I can. And I have to feel I'm owning it, that I'm not there because I'm the first of any particular thing. I'm there because I have a job to do, and I'm going to do it the best way that I can. So I tend not to think about that first thing, but it is important to have role models, even if they're the imagined ones in your head.
I love that. Thank you. And I love that you can find role models. You found it in Shakespeare. You can find role models anywhere, everywhere. Books you're reading, the movies you're watching, the music you're listening to, it's all out there. It all exists.
And it comes back, these multiple passions. So I then grew up, obviously, with a passion for Shakespeare, and I went to see my first play. I'd just read it. I'd never seen it performed. And when I came to Britain, I was about your age, 17, 18. That was the first time I saw a play. And it really freaked me out. I had a panic attack, actually, because here it was on stage, and it was invading my imagination, because before it'd only been in my imagination. Here they were playing it out in a completely different way, not the way I wanted. But then I fell in love with it because they had a better imagination than I did, and I loved it. And here I am, how many more than I'm going to reveal my age, but 45 years later, chairing the Royal Shakespeare Company because they somehow heard that I loved Shakespeare, and they kind of they turned up and asked if I would apply to be the chair, and I said of course, and I'm chairing the Royal Shakespeare Company. It's like my dream.
Wow. Well, round of applause for that dream. Let's go and live your dream. Go and live your dream. And also, it's the journey, the things you pick up along the way that make the difference. Right? So have a really wide-ranging journey. Go and grab those things. Last thing before we move to questions from our amazing young people, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions. I'm super excited. Advice, Shriti. If you had advice for these young people in the room, and I love what you said about when you're a chair, you're not thinking about the fact that you're the first woman or the first person of color. You're there, you've earned it. You're there to do a job. So when you find yourself in those spaces, own it, because you deserve it. You deserve to be there. You deserve to be here. You deserve to be in all of the spaces where you belong. Don't forget that. So what advice, Shriti, would you give to our amazing audience? Things you wish you knew when you were their age, when you were 17.
I guess I would say, don't be so anxious to myself. I was, anxious. I'd just come into this country. I was, needing to prove a lot of things, do a lot of things, and just enjoy it. It's going to be all right. That's what I would love to say to have said to myself, or somebody say to me.
Sorry.
And whatever it is, you don't know what it's going to be, but it will be okay. It won't always be easy. Will have its really dark moments. However successful you are, they will come. That is inevitable, but it will be all right. And the most important thing is to enjoy that moment. Whichever moment you're in, be in the moment and enjoy it and relax.
And that's all we have, the moment, right? The moment after the moment is not promised to us. And I love what you said, it's going to turn okay. I would suggest that it's turned out better than okay. But incredibly good advice. Thank you so much. Okay, ladies and gents, and everyone, over to you. We've got someone with a mic. Ready? Lovely. Thank you. Okay, raise your hand if you have a question, please. Raise your hand. We've got questions there, sir. Okay, yeah.
60-second responses.
Sure.
Yes,
okay.
Okay, so sir, your name, if you're comfortable standing up, that would be great, but no pressure. Your name, your school, and your question, please.
So my name is Nelson Palmer, and I'm from the London Academy of Excellence, Tottenham. My question to you is, you've given us that wonderful quote regarding you can't be the best version of somebody else, but only yourself. At such a young age, around our age, before you could get all these experiences in different avenues, what really did shape your character and your drive to get to all these spaces? Because, we think that our upbringing, our own school experiences is what pushes us, but you seem to have been a rebel against every other odd against you. So what really created your character at that age, which led you to where you are today?
Good question. Wow. I love the rebel point.
That is so insightful. So wow, you've got a super strength of that. I think two things. The first is seeing poverty, and I saw it in my the lady that looked after me when I was growing up in Uganda. I played with her kids. They were my age. They were my friends, and they couldn't go to school. And so for me, it was, what do you mean you can't go? I mean, if I can go to school, you can go to school. And we ended up going to speak to my granny about why they weren't going to school, because they had to pay for school and she didn't have the money. I thought that was just outrageous. Because you're 4 and that's what you think. And the person I loved the most in the world was like my carer. And And so and she had a partner, a husband who would sort of drink and gamble the money away. So my granny was like, I'm not, this is making me really nervous. So we used to go to the school every month to pay the fees for them. That was because I cared about my friends and I cared about the fact that they didn't have what I had. And it's about seeing poverty and wanting to make the difference and not wanting to live the life that was just being comfortable in myself. And I guess and that's why I say to you, you've got to discover the thing you care about, the things you care about. It can't just, just be one thing, and follow that, because that will see you through. That will see you through everywhere and give you the strength to be the rebel.
I love that question. I love that answer. Thank you so much. Yeah, Banad Law. I thought goosebumps. Mr. Jordan, next question. Everyone that asks a question gets a future leader's pen. Yes, miss.
My name's Elsaig Bedo. I go to Lee Valley Academy, and my question to you is, what was your biggest accomplishment and how did that shape you as a person?
What was my biggest accomplishment and how did it shape me as a person? I don't know if I know what people say it is in the public and in the press, which was to help create the plan around the financial crisis that we talked about. And in one sense, it put me very much in the spotlight publicly, and therefore it shaped a lot of the opportunities that I got. I don't think that's my biggest accomplishment. I understand that's what people think it is. For me, the moment I remember the most, that I feel the most passionate about and I care about the most, is to the previous question, after I knew what not having free education meant to my friends. And about 25 years later, I was fighting for debt relief for countries in Africa. And I was working then already, because I lobbied him and things. I was working for Gordon Brown when he was the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And we got debt relief given to 42 countries, mostly in Africa, but in other parts of the world as well. And we had to negotiate what they were going to use that money for. And I went back to Uganda, which was the country of my birth, and the country that I'd advised subsequently, and negotiated that the money would be used to give every child free education. And when that was announced, it was in the International Monetary Fund building in the Washington, and all the leaders were together and they were doing all of that announcement. I was standing in the back of the hall, and my colleague from the Treasury turned around to me and she said, "Why are you crying?" And I went, "Oh, I didn't realize I was crying. I was crying because it had taken, decades, but I had gone back to what I'd really wanted to do, and I'd done it. And that for me was my biggest accomplishment. It's just not something that people talk about, but that's where I felt."
Oh, wow. I'm going to need tissues soon. I love that. Imagine advising the country where you were born. Advising the country. Just think of the macro level of just that statement when you're advising a nation. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Amir Jarbawi, and my question for you is, what kept you motivated throughout your journey, and what maintained that drive? Obviously, you said it was through a few decades, so what kept you motivated?
Few decades? How dare you? We're about 21.
I'm 62. So, you do other things. You don't lose it. You come back to it. So I went on to do other things. I was working on the financial crisis. I wasn't working on Africa, but I got the opportunity and the moment came. So you have to have more than one thing that you're going to do, because sometimes these big things take time, but you don't lose it. It comes back, you find the balance, and you never lose it completely. And if it's going to take a long burn, you do the next passion thing. So you find a balance in what you're doing. And when you start to feel frustrated and unhappy, and it's not just a one night thing. You're feeling frustrated and unhappy over months, possibly longer. Then you know you're in the wrong place. You're doing the wrong thing. And I have had that. Of course I have. I've been working for 40 years. How would I not be, find myself subtly in the wrong kind of, why am I doing this? I don't understand. At that point, the important thing is to make the change and to go into the thing I'm really caring about is not ready. Nobody wants to do this thing that I really care about. I'll do something else that I care about and it'll come good and you'll find a way back into it another way. And if you find yourself in a long-term frustrated sort of role or course or whatever you're doing, give it a bit of time. Make sure it's not just your mood at that point in time. But if it's going to be a long-term thing, then you've got to get out.
Yeah. Love that. I love that. Thank you. Next question, sir.
Hi, my name's Isra Dahir and I'm from Arc Academy. And today we're talking about being the first in spaces. And my question is, have you ever felt alienated as being the first woman of colour or just women in a space? And if so, how have you combated this?
Yes, of course. I still feel it sometimes. I can walk into a group of chairs and I'll quite often be the only woman. I went to, I've been to big international meetings. It was the first time I went to the World Bank IMF meetings was a long time ago. And I was accompanying my boss, who was a very eminent economist, and they turned around to me and they said, "I'm sorry, madam, but spouses aren't allowed." So, I wasn't, I was the only woman there, so they thought I'd sort of accidentally come in to accompany a husband of some description. So, yes, I walk into a room and you feel you don't belong. And you walk into a room and you feel you know nobody and they all know each other and they've all been friends forever and they all went to the same school or something. And yeah, it's grim. But you're there for a reason. Usually you are there because it's to do a job. You're not going to go out and socialize. You don't get party with it. That's not, but you're there because you got a job and you deserve it. And you have to kind of gird your loins and remember that and go in and perform and earn that respect. And you may have to work harder to earn it than they do. And I get that. I get that's unfair. But there's no point in being bitter about it. You just got to do it. And so after a point, it's a strange thing to happen to one, but I now almost enjoy it. It's like, bring it on. I'm going to show you. So, but you have to get to a certain level and a certain seniority and a certain sort of, grey hair to get to that place. But it's not easy. I'm going to lie to you.
Thank you. Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever felt alienated because you're a woman of color, I wonder? And I'd ask you that to see if things are changing,
Not so much, no, so far.
Good. Excellent.
Good. You're really delighted to hear that.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll do a few more questions. A hand up if you got a question. Yeah. So you pick, sir. I trust in your picking.
Oh. Eh? Oh, okay. So I'm still recovering from a sore throat. But my name's Angel and I go to City in Islington in Angel. And the question that I have to ask you is obviously you had your principal wasn't the nicest person on earth, but you had your deputy head to help you with your application. And obviously from all the achievements that you've made since that moment, have you ever heard from her say congratulations or anything? Or what do you think she would say to you?
Yeah.
So giving you that.
She's sadly not alive anymore, but I did go back. I went back about 15 years later. She'd retired. I don't know if she really understood what a difference she made. I think I left it too late. I think she was just, at a particular stage in her life where she wasn't completely able to understand. So you know what? There's nothing as amazing. That's such a good question because I wish I had gone back earlier. And to all the people who've helped, I may not have had role models, but I had a lot of people who were prepared to help. And just remember, there's nothing wrong with asking for it. What's the worst thing that can happen? They say no. Well, so what? But quite often they'll say yes because people actually like to help and they like to think that they're going to make a difference. And going back and saying thank you would be so wonderful. And thank you for asking, because I occasionally think about her and wonder kick myself, why didn't I go back a bit earlier?
Yeah, she knew. As teachers,
I'd like to fix her.
Yeah, definitely. As teachers, and most of us are teachers in this room, you know when you've had that impact, and you know when you can see that confidence build in that young person and then go out and do something. You going out and doing it was the thank you. So that she didn't need to hear thank you. Seeing you achieve.
Well, thank you for letting me off the hook.
It's the truth. Round of applause for that. Okay, I'm conscious of time, so we'll just do one or two more. I know some people have been waiting a long time, and if you don't get your question asked, we will see if you can ask that question separately. Dismiss.
Hi, my name is Emily Cousin, and I go in sixth form. I want to come back to the quote because I quoted you. You said someone said to you that our clients wouldn't want someone that looks like you. Especially being someone that is of not the normal. How would you now reply to that person now being in the status that you are?
Ooh, good question. These questions, I swear, good question.
I'd probably report him to somebody and get him fired.
Wonderful. Let's go.
Yeah. I mean, I shouldn't have taken it. Basically,
I love that. And you know what? If I could add on to that, actually, what he needs to hear is clients do want someone like
yes, they do.
Exactly,
they do, and in fact, they did, because yes, some of them might have been a bit taken aback when they first saw me, but in the end, they were judging me by the work because that's what they cared about.
Exactly, right? You're bringing the quality; they want the quality.
Yeah.
So in his face. Okay, next question.
Hi, my name is Ada Barsid and I go to Westminster Kingsway College. Tonight you spoke about your cultural background with such high remarks, whether it be your upbringing in Uganda or time in India. Being the first woman or person of color in many spaces, how do you go about integrating your culture in these positions? Do you find it difficult holding onto your identity, or do you ever feel scared of erasure?
I think that is a really important question. I didn't do it well. It took me a long time to get it right. I mentioned it in passing. I tried to fit in because it was so uncomfortable not to fit in. And I wouldn't necessarily have progressed in some of the places that I was at for different reasons. I didn't know whether it was the female. I didn't know whether it was it's hard to tell. But I tried so hard to fit in that I hid my culture. I hid who I was in some of the early days. It took me a long time before I felt comfortable with people to become the whole of who I am. And it's only later that I started to recognize the fact that my culture was that what I knew and what I inherited was my strength, that it gave me something unique. I was helped by my family. My brother and his wife, who I know are big supporters of yours. They brought me back in a way, and I had to re-own my culture. And now it's integrated in a way that I'm comfortable with, and I'm comfortable with my own skin. But it took me a long time. And my advice would be, I hope that you don't have to take, if any of you have that issue, not to have to take as long to put all the fragmented parts of your identity together to become the whole that is uniquely you. Because I lived it in fragmented ways. My mother was so traditional, didn't speak very good English, and here I was, in a bank and advising governments, and it was so far away. They were so fragmented. I couldn't bring it together for a long time. and I couldn't own it in a way. So it took a while, and it's not easy, but I hope that there's been enough change in the world for it to be somewhat easier for any of you facing that.
Oh, amazing advice. And I read a study recently about code switching.
Yeah.
Young people, particularly from diverse backgrounds, they're in school, they're one personality. They go home, they have to live this completely other life.
Of course.
Because the culture and, the expectations are so different. And actually the stress and the impact it has on young people's well-being.
Yeah.
Living in that environment. And we all lived through it, didn't we? I mean, I remember being embarrassed to tell people I was from Pakistan when I was growing up. I'd say, oh, this, that, and the other, like I make up stories. And so much of that struggle is still there, isn't there?
Yeah.
And that's why this work is so important.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, we're so grateful to your brother and his wife who run Lifeline's foundation, who've been great supporters of ours for 6 years and who've made our work possible. So it's a real privilege. Final question. Final question. Ooh, that's a big hand there. Mr. Joe, you might have to run up. Final question. All right. Make it a good one. Pressure.
My name is Shams and I go at Oasis Academy Hadley. My question was, having worked across not completely, but such diverse fields like finance, government and the arts, were there any unexpected parallels or lessons that you've learned from working across so many different fields?
It's not for everybody, so I'm not going to recommend it as a sort of thing. Because, you have to, for me, it is about bringing, to the previous question, bringing all of myself together because they're all part of me. And I don't want to live without doing something important for the arts that I believe so passionately in. And I don't want to do something where I understand the importance of finance in people's lives and the economy in people's lives. And so for me, being a part of a complete balanced person is really important. But I understand it's not for everybody. It's just the way I'm made. So I have to accept that. And I have to accept that it comes with an enormous stress of being spread too thin and, being in that. And it started at school where I was the only kid doing English and maths at A level. And, all the teachers were kind of cross with me because I was messing up everybody's timetable. And even now it's I have to be in too many different places because there are too many disparate parts of my life. So it's not an easy thing, but in one sense, you start to join the dots and understand that they're a part of the same bigger picture, that how creative work, creative education, arts education brings out the best type of thinking that could make you good at algebra. It helps you understand how the creative economy is one of the big futures of the world because it's not, creative economy sounds like, as I said, actors, but actually it's the creators of content. It's the biggest product we consume in the world today is content. Whether we consume it in a book, whether it's streaming, whether it's in film, whether it's in advertising, we're creating content. And creative industries is about creating content in different ways. So I help people understand it because I can bring the finance and the economics to it. And I can help people in finance and economics understand the importance of how you develop your analytical skills. So for me, joining those dots, I know that they look disparate for people from the outside, but to me, they're connected and I can connect them because that's how I have lived those experiences.
Incredibly wise words for us to finish on this evening. Shriti, I'd just like to say, I know how incredibly busy your diary is and how intense the demand is on your time and the very, very important places and spaces that you're usually in. So we're so grateful that you would spend the evening with our incredible young people and share a huge amount of wisdom.
Well, can I just say something, how I'm blown away by the questions and the insight of those questions, and I can feel that in the room, and I feel so proud of all of you. You're going to go places. It's going to be fantastic.